Hello and welcome to the Glenfiddich Challengers Club podcast, coming to you from the skyline of the City of Gold. Hosted live in the world's first whiskey bar in a billboard located in Johannesburg. The Glenfiddich Challengers Club is a space of shared opinion, views, and perspectives of success brought to you by Glenfiddich, the world's most awarded single malt Scotch whiskey. Each week, we curate a themed discussion with some of South Africa's most brilliant minds, a selection of changemakers and visionaries in a forum designed to inspire, equip, and motivate the next generation. Welcome to the Challengers Club. All right, so welcome to the Challengers Club. I, as your host, Mo Flavor, I'm very excited to be here tonight as we host another session of the Glenfiddich Challengers Club podcast series. So every week we have a theme that speaks to progress, that speaks to your journey to success. And today we are looking at innovation and, of course, avoiding complacency in building your respective journeys of progress. Looking forward to this discussion. So, for the purposes of the podcast, we're going to go around the room and do some short intros. I will start with the lady on my left. Good evening, madam.
Good evening.
What is your name?
I am Nogwanda Mhlambo, and I am Deputy Commercial Director for GQ Magazine. And Condé
Wonderful.
Nast, yeah.
Welcome.
Hello, Mo.
Hello, Bryce.
Hi, everyone. My name's Bryce, a.k.a. DJ Ankletap, and I'm a radio DJ and morning show host.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mo T, and I'm the trumpeter of Mi Casa, and I got a great passion for brass.
Please prove that for us. Prove that you're a trumpeter.
Okay, should I?
There we go.
That was just to show you that no one plays for me.
Good. and that it actually works, which is fantastic. Thank you very much for joining us. Yes, good evening.
Is it time to blow my horn now?
Yeah,
Hi, everyone. My name is Nkosi Yati Kumalo, also known as Yati. I'm the editor-in-chief of GQ South Africa.
Thank you.
Hi, peeps. My name is Owen Mohale. I'm in the construction business.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kope. They know me as Twizer, as the musician, and Mregza on Generations.
Yay.
My name is Jill Strawberry, and I'm an influencer marketing manager.
Lutando Tibini, National Brand Ambassador for Glenfiddich.
Beautiful. So now that we got those intros out the way, let's look at our theme for tonight. Now, of course, in this journey to, quite frankly, wherever it is we are heading in our respective individual journeys, there are a couple of things we need to know, we need to do in order to get to wherever we're going. And one of the big things is innovation. Being able to come up with ways of achieving, your journey through to success. Coming up with different ways of challenging the norm, challenging what we understand to be, the right way to do things. And I suppose as an innovative person, you need to find creative ways to, to take your journey to the next level. So when we talk about innovation, as broad as it is, I think there's certain key things that we can narrow down in terms of the key things you need to understand about, being someone who can come up with different ways to get to where they need to be. So can we all be innovators? I mean, is it something that we are born with? Is it something that we are taught from a young age? I think maybe we need to start there to understand what it is, in your view, to be somebody who's an innovator. Maybe let me start with Yati, since he's, buzzing there around this word. And, when we talk about being an innovator, what do you understand that to be?
For me, the word sounds very macro, and I think that's where our ideas about being innovative and being an innovator start. It sounds as if we have to be the new Steve Jobs and invent a new iPhone, or we have to be the new Bill Gates and invent a new Microsoft, or whatever it may be. It sounds very big. For me, I think innovation can come in small ways too, and it can be a very micro thing. Whether you're working in corporate or you're an entrepreneur or whatever you may be doing. But there might be small ways that you can say, let me just change this about how I work and how I think, and maybe that can influence a new system of doing things, even in just my small little team here in accounts receivable, for example. You know, maybe we just try something here. That's a form of innovation. And it's something that is one match that can strike a whole fire and can really encourage other people to just make small changes like that. And it becomes a habit. Those small changes keep growing and growing. And before you know it, you've been innovating without really realizing. You've just been looking at the picture in front of you and saying, maybe there's a way I can make this better.
Sure.
And I don't want to be comfortable where I am and stay where I am, because I don't grow that way. I don't learn anything. I can't teach anything that way either if I don't learn anything. So what can I learn? How can I grow? Let me see what small ways I can affect my picture, and maybe that will have knock-on effects in the bigger picture. And it often, or almost always does. And that's when I see innovation happening.
I want to jump in there, and I want to bring Moti in here, because when he speaks about, innovation in his understanding, is that something that he was taught? Is there something that he learned over the years? I mean, how do you see it in terms of just being able to get to that point of thinking?
Yeah, it's like a bit of both, of something that you've been taught, but also Moti standing in the mirror and saying, yo, it's Moti versus Moti now, like the Moti of 2018 versus the Moti of 2019 type of thing. So how will Moti actually beat the other Moti, or the recent Moti, should I say, from the recent years? And you also have to listen to like more musicians, more trumpeters, more, like the Hugh Masekelas of this world, like the Miles Davis, but also seeing what they did, but also trying to come back and saying, how am I actually still reminding people that this is the Moti sound, but it's actually changed it like a little bit, So
Sure.
It's an ongoing thing that doesn't stop.
I mean, you mentioned something interesting about the Moti of 5 years ago versus the Moti of now, which for me speaks to some sort of progression from one point to the next, and the thinking that it can't be the same person. But the how we do that is for me what's key. And Owen, I think I want to bring you in here. How do we get to that point where we can, think at that level and achieve this innovation at a constant level where you can look back on yourself 5 years ago and say, this is where I was 5 years ago and this is where I am today?
It's actually quite difficult. I mean, you can measure it, right?
Okay. So you can measure it because you look at it in retrospect and say, well, this is where I was. But again, the how do you, if you look at your own personal journey, how were you able to innovate in your journey to success?
There is no one plan for it. I think in everybody's journey, you struggle, you do something different, you struggle, you do something different. And
I think maybe until you find it. Because you're constantly trying different things. Because we had this conversation downstairs.
Yeah.
From where we came from and where we are now. And, it's quite strange looking back, me and him as hustlers. The conversation that we had was how we started as BEEs into actually being people that specialize in a certain field, and break away from competing with BEEs in that big portal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I find that also fascinating, Twiza, because one thing I'm picking up here is the sense of ambition. And I think ambition is key in being a driving force to us constantly trying to improve who we are, what we do. But Jill, tapping into that ambition, I mean, how do we do that? How do we tap into that driving force?
For me, it's been less about sort of having a vision of where I want to be and more about the challenges that have come to me naturally and having to innovate and creative problem solve on my feet to survive almost. And I think that's a lot of it is also, it's a survival thing. You've got to innovate or die. And I've recreated myself 100 times. If I look back on what I actually studied, which was graphic design, to all the different iterations of jobs that I've had throughout my career, to where I've kind of landed now in a place where I actually really want to be. It's taken a lot of hardship to get here, and I think that hardship is actually helped.
Something else I wanna throw in here is, this desire to play in different spaces. or this desire to go beyond where you are, and you've always got to know where you want to go. But how do you identify what these new spaces are that you wanna be in? Maybe I'll bring Bryce in here. I mean, you've been in radio for many years. It happens to be a great passion of mine. I don't think it defines who I am, but it's a great passion of mine. When it comes to innovation and constantly reinventing yourself to, remain being interesting to your audience, I mean, how is that achieved?
I think the key word when it comes to innovation is challenge, which is why it's such a great concept that we've got tonight, because to innovate means to challenge like the status quo. Okay, you've got to look at the way things are now, and the real innovators are the ones that want to do something differently. But it's a very individual thing. For me, it's a very personal thing. Innovation, I've always said innovation will distinguish between leaders and followers. And the reason I say that is those that get caught up in a trend, or those that get caught up in a particular lane, you'll find that the next big thing or the next innovation will come from outside of that, or someone that stepped outside of the norm.
Sure.
And in my personal journey, like you said, with radio, especially working at a youth station, you've got an audience that's growing, but you're constantly, as a brand, trying to speak to a younger audience. So I think the word you used was reinvention. For me personally, I've had to reinvent myself year after year after year to not only maintain the audience that have grown with me, but also appeal to that same audience that you first appealed to. And that is, in essence, innovation. With my personal journey, it's come through my name, for example, and the gradual changing of the different ways I identify myself and growing into this, now being called Malume, and actually growing into that and identifying that, okay, cool, I need to speak from that mindset to this particular audience and innovate the way that I present myself in the space that I'm in order to stay relevant. So you've kind of got to step outside of what you're doing and what you're known for to push boundaries.
Sure. I want to pause you there, and I want to bring Jazz in, because what I'm also picking up from Bryce is, creating some sort of point of distinction. In that, in your innovation and, trying to come up with different things or reinventing yourself, you've got to constantly find a way of keeping yourself different to everybody else, which almost means you got to find a way of keeping yourself ahead of the pack, as it were. Is it as easy as just being said, as in the way I've put it?
Well, it's quite a journey. I think innovation is not something that just comes overnight. It becomes a journey because, as Bryce was saying, you need to start challenging yourself. The lifespan of a brand ambassador, for example, you're looking about plus minus 2 to 3 years. But how do you stay relevant? It means that you become a brand within a brand. So you're still an individual. You still have your own character, and those are things that you don't get taught. But these are things that you actually build within a certain space that you actually are at that point.
Nogwanda, I mean, he says, innovation is not necessarily something you're born with. Maybe you're taught, or maybe you're not taught, or whatever. Is there a danger to this constant, relentless task of trying to be innovative? Is it something that can derail you from whatever it is that you're trying to do, your journey, your purpose, or does it work hand in hand, in a beautiful way with whatever it is you're trying to achieve?
Well, I think, as in most things in life, there's always like an advantage and a disadvantage to a lot of things. I think ambition, there are more advantages to it. There's more of a positive side. I mean, who doesn't want to be fulfilled when looking back at their life at the age of 70, 80 and know that you gave your best in every situation, that you changed certain rules, because certain situations that we're born into as well. I think one of the key ingredients that everyone's mentioned are challenges. Innovators are born out of hard-pressing situations where you've got to, break a glass ceiling or come through the roof or under the ground, because the door, as we all know it, is either full or someone's closed it, or there are barriers to entry. So, I mean, having said that, going back to your question, of course there'll be pros and there'll be cons. So do you want to lose yourself for the sake of ambition and reaching an innovative status? Not really. So I think values and principles become important at that place. Your foundation, your character. You've got to decide with yourself without like your parents or, a school or a church telling you what you should believe in. Your foundation needs to know what I believe in before I start on this route of breaking down, barriers. Because I think we all know, especially for myself in business, there are lots of temptations. There are easy ways, there are hard ways, there are quick ways.
And what do you prefer?
Usually, it's frustrating, but the road less traveled is usually the one that's most sustainable.
I mean, one of the other things is knowing where to go next. And, when we talk about journeys, it's also about, opportunities, maybe new opportunities. And I would imagine that in the world we live in, everybody wants to be first to the pond, or first to the paddle, or first to the well, or first to the oil, whatever it is, first to the Bitcoin, whatever it is. So what is that driving force behind finding these new opportunities? Is there anything special to it? Is it something that you have a nose for, to know? Some people say, this guy just knows. He just always knows where to go next. What is the driving force behind that? Maybe I'll bring Jill in on this one, and then we'll just spread it around the table.
Driving force would be experience. And how do you know what's right and what's wrong? It's from many sort of taking those wrong paths and sort of learning from those wrong directions that you've gone before, that you can spot a good thing when you see it. So it's difficult, like, to be an innovator when you're in your 20s and your 30s and your 40s. It's always about being sort of bigger and better than you were when you were younger, and that is from nosing and sniffing out those opportunities and making those mistakes and then learning from those.
Because there's also a risk factor with being an innovator, with taking chances, in this new space or new journey, or just this idea that you have. Twaza, you mentioned dabbling outside of, the acting and entertainment space and in construction. I mean, tell us about that journey in the context of, finding new opportunities. I mean, how did you know that that's where you need to be next?
I don't think I don't think there's a formula to life. You know what I mean? I usually rely on instinct and faith, because I usually think of things, convince myself it's a good idea, try it until it bums out. Usually it fails because I don't have maybe the necessary support behind it. But looking back and looking at my laptop today, I've got so many proposals with so many brands and headings and so forth that haven't gone through. But, you constantly have to keep going, because, nobody owes you anything. I think when you grow up, you start realizing that your parents only play a role to a certain point, and then after that, you're responsible for you. You know what I mean? So for me, it's riding on instinct, riding on the skills that you developed, and the reason why you're doing it. Are you doing it to enrich yourself? Are you doing it to, spread knowledge and so forth? Like, my dream was always to open an academy, and that for me was just to bridge the rural and, the media hubs like Johannesburg, because the inboxes that I'd get coming from Limpopo is, how do I make it onto generations, or how do I make it onto TV? And the true answer that I would have to give would be, you have to come to Joburg. Now that's cost, there's cost implications, there's transport, there's knowing where to go, being robbed, and all these challenges. But I wanted to be that catalyst that brings back what I've learned and open an academy in my own province, so we can also keep the economy in the province. See, but I've consistently, even though I've tried different things, but this has always been my consistent goal.
And somehow every other thing that you've tried out somehow feeds directly or indirectly into this ultimate goal that you have for yourself.
100%.
All right, I'm going to pause you there for a second, because I don't want to lose this thought. Yati, I want to bring you in here when we talk about instinct in the context of being an innovator, and how do you relate to that?
For me, and touching on Jill's point about experience, experience is one side of it for me. I think the other side of it is research. And that's where you can kind of cheat the experience factor. Because obviously we live in an age now where you can look up any story and any history and see the methodology behind it. Whether you're 20 or 40 or 80, so the experience kind of gets cheated out by the fact that you can research and really look into those things. I think knowing the kind of playing field that you're dealing with is very important, and recognizing those factors that will affect your future are very important. I think it's also a bit of curiosity, and I think that's natural to everybody. I mean, you look at kids and they just ask 1,000 questions. Why? Why are we driving this way? Why do you drive this car? Why is the car blue? Why do you turn left here instead of right? That's a very natural thing that we all have. I think what we end up being taught is to suppress that. And I think a big portion of being innovative is actively unlearning that suppression. So we can ask those questions. Why was it done this way? How about we try it a different way? Whether it's in our personal lives or just at work or whatever we're doing. But that's where I see it's curiosity for me is a big one.
I love that because and it's bigger than just about people who are learned or people who went to school. It's almost like a culture we need to instill within our kids to say, it's good to ask a lot of questions because that's essentially what discovery is all about. Somebody asked a question, the answer is somewhere out there. And I think that's a very, very powerful thing that you mentioned. Moti, I want to bring you in here as well. I suppose as a person who is in a space that's very competitive, when you look at, the music space and, how many other artists there are, how many bands there are, groups and whatever. So when we talk about, looking at the idea of new spaces to tap into, new opportunities, are you under greater pressure to look for all these new opportunities because of the competitive environment that you find yourself in?
That's one thing that Mikasa has always gotten itself to say that, guys, listen, we're not going to fall into the same pot as all the artists, So we always choose to have our own path. And and from whatever that we create, we make people follow us from there, We always like to give away real quality and to keep that quality also. And that's why today, I can still play La Vida, and you know what La Vida is, and still play Heavenly Sent, and you know what Heavenly Sent is, because we're making quality music, These Streets, that song's 9 years old. All these songs that I've mentioned are 9 years old. Next year we're turning 10 years, And that's just the difference from that whole thing of chasing after the market at that time. And that's money. It's chasing after the money, you know?
You mentioned something that I find very scary.
Yeah,
And maybe just to pause you there, Moti, and bring in Nogwanda, the idea of saying, okay, let me step back because there's too many kids in the playground or too many cooks in the kitchen. Let me stand back and just watch. I mean, is that something that we all have the luxury of doing? Is it something that you can do in your industry and say, hang on, everyone is doing the same thing, so let me take a step back and maybe let's chill and maybe find our own corner or relax and see where the wave goes next.
Yeah, look, I think that really speaks to your authenticity and your willingness to, preserve what you are known for, and ultimately what's gonna make you an innovator at the end of the day. So when there are too many kids playing in the sandpit, you run the risk of being watered down or losing or conforming to certain mindsets or, playing ball just because you want to be relevant, but losing what actually, what gives you the passion or gives you the drive. So I would say in my space, it's a very thin line between keeping your authenticity and going with the flow because you just need to get stuff done from a day-to-day basis. Yeah.
All right, now, where do we ultimately, can we stick it down to something? Can we say that, to someone who wants to be something one day, if you want to be great, you got to be innovative, and this is what it means? Or is it about understanding, who you are first before you even embark on that journey?
It's a personal choice. It's not something that can be taught. I think inspiration is surrounding us daily. We just don't know it. I mean, if I took you 14 years ago without Facebook, I can tell you Facebook, the idea was always there. You just never found it, marked it. I can tell you Twitter was there. I can tell you everything around us. This beautiful billboard bar we in was there. We found it. our competitors. Too late now. But, it's all about perspective. It's about, for me, and this is my view on it, it's really about because if you refined in your own understanding of yourself, these things just find you. And you start picking up, and for me, that's the common denominator across the table, is that you almost can't be innovative without understanding what you possess to innovate with. I think you need to start understanding, because I can't innovate. I can't, give you something I don't have. I can't come up with something that I haven't. Jill spoke about experience, and we had a chat about instincts. Those are all things that, to me, they come back to: have I got self mastery? Have I understood myself so that I'm not distracted by? Mo raised a good point. Moti goes, we're not going to be in it for the sake of doing it. We've got a different perspective to this. We know what we possess, and we know what we're trying to curate and innovate and bring to the world. And we'll wait until our time has arrived, until we know, according to our plan, our perspective on this is the right time to launch. So to simply just go because everyone's going, and we're seeing a lot of this. Again, I like being a tad controversial and stretching our minds in this conversation, and go as far as saying, so whilst we want this fourth industrial revolution, right, in South Africa that everyone is on a buzz about, but if everyone's producing shoes, then come on, like, we can only be relevant for that long if we're all doing the same thing. Yeah. It's no different to producing music that sounds the same everywhere. It's no different to publications that are the same, whiskey that is the same in our world, So you've got to kind of pause and say, what is the world in need of? And go back to yourself. Have I got the resources within myself to produce that need and feed that need? And I think that, for me, is, if I could sum that up in my view, I don't know how it lands on your end, but in my view, it starts, and it's crucial to have the prerequisite of perspective and having the clear decision and mind frame to innovate.
Now, one of the other things is, on your journey, you're almost doing the same thing over and over again, whether you're doing a radio show, whether you're an editor, whatever, a whiskey connoisseur. At some point, you fall into a groove and you run the danger of being complacent. I mean, Moti, when we talk about never being done, we're not done. It's not enough. How do you know when that point is? Is it unfair to yourself to constantly expect one to be always just doing one thing after the next? Can there never be a point where you just say, you know what, I'm happy, I'm done?
Well, coming from a group, we've never had that saying that we're done, but we've had a phase where we'd say, yo, let's take a break, let's chill, and like from the first album, actually, let me just say, because the first album had so many hits, and From These Streets, La Vida, Heavenly Sent, All the Glory, there were so many hits from that album. Then we're like, yo, now the second album, James, what's going to happen? Because everyone's waiting for us, and it's like, yo, or should I change my instrument, or should I change, but like, no, we're not changing anything,
So reaching a high point can be a scary thing.
That was very scary
for you, because you almost think you can't do better than that. Yeah,
so we're like, gents, we've had so many hits from the first album, we've put out so many hits, and like now people are waiting for the second one, and there were more artists also at the time also with hits, and we're just thinking, saying, gents, what's gonna happen, And we really didn't think about money, I always bring the money in, We just thought of like the reputation, and you say, who is Mikasa? What does Mikasa want for the next 10 years, for the next 20 years? And that's why we're turning 10 years next year, because we didn't take it that what's gonna happen next year and then that's it, And that's been something that we've always had, just to say, gents, what's gonna happen, And as much as I spoke about reinventing Moti, Duda did the same thing, and Jay Something also did the same thing, where they also went to him and they were like, listen, how does Jay Something actually like become better, from the Jay Something that we actually all like know, and how does Duda do the same thing? So that's been a scary thing, but we've managed to actually, from the first album to the fourth album now, we've actually managed to go, or should I say, get over it,
And conquer some of those fears.
Yes,
Sure.
And something that's also helped us a lot has been traveling. Traveling has been, people may take it light, but we get so many countries and we ask people, hey man, like, have you been to South Africa? Have you been to African countries? Where have you been? And guys say, no, I've just been here in Nigeria, or I've been in Angola the whole time, and I've been, no, you need to travel more,
So that forms as a source of inspiration, I would
yes,
imagine.
Yes, definitely.
New ideas, different ways of doing things.
Like looking at the third album, the one with Don't Wanna Be Your Friend and Chocolate, and sorry for mentioning the hits, man, but,
it's okay. If you can't help it, you can't help it.
But you know what?
There's no ceiling.
Yeah, but that third album was actually like unplanned. We just said, gents, we don't know how we're going to do it, but we just want to be out of South Africa. Let's just travel, And while we're traveling, we just said, gents, we're going to Italy, we're going to London, we're going to Amsterdam, we're going to Portugal. How are we going to work with new artists from there, And we started connecting with new guys from there that were also like within the house scene. And we said, yo, how can we actually work with these guys, And that's how the third album was made. And we ended up making a double disc. And there was so much music that we made just on a tour.
Sure.
And that was us going away for a month.
And all of a sudden, that fear that you had has now changed into hunger. And now there's, a double disc and you're traveling the world. I mean, it's beautiful. And it's amazing how we can achieve if we just conquer some of these barriers.
What? That actually got us more excited of what we were doing. Because sometimes guys get bored and say, hey, man, I'm tired.
Yeah. I want to bring Jez in on that one. I mean, you've been, a brand ambassador for 7 years, probably a whiskey enthusiast for longer. I mean, where does it go from there? Is that all you can be in the space? Is there more? I don't know. I mean, in football, they say, 10 years, 12 years, you're done, For being a whiskey connoisseur and a brand ambassador, is there even a ceiling to something like that?
The moment you are exposed to the type of people that I've been exposed to, you can never ever be hungry in your life. Hungry in terms of knowledge, hungry in terms of gaining experience. Yes, that experience, as Yati was saying, sometimes experience is not gained by going through the path. Sometimes you draw energy and becomes your personal experience. So for me, it's endless possibilities. Being a brand ambassador has opened many doors for me, because fortunately, as a global team and the mandate, what they normally say is that they want us to be entrepreneurs. So I am in the tourism space. I am in the data space. I do have an MPC. I'm in property. So there are many other things that actually have come out of being a brand ambassador itself. So I think the moment you start, if you let's say for instance, if you start selling books and not selling a lifestyle, and then you are losing it. I don't sell whiskey, I sell a lifestyle. So that's why I become relevant, because once you start selling a lifestyle, your Instagram pages changes, your Facebook changes, your Facebook pages changes. I've got this thing called Shoes Day, where I feature shoes, and I'm not on the whiskey space. You understand? So now people relate to me, and I become relevant without them having to see a whiskey. But everything that they see can also still relate to what I do, because that's what I've built myself as a brand.
Absolutely. And I want to throw in something here as well, which I think is very important, to challenge the norm, challenge status quo, challenge convention. Some may argue it's a great thing. Some may argue it's dangerous, because you're constantly in the state of change and everybody's going to come and challenge, and next year someone else will challenge, and who knows where the world will go. So the importance of challenging convention in whatever way, whether it's in thinking or whether it's in how we do things in practice. Yati, what do you think that is? What is the importance of challenging the way things work as we see them?
I think it's important because it forces you to not be complacent. Being too complacent and being too stuck in what made you successful yesterday is so dangerous. And that's what will kind of throw you off and make you disappear. Whereas if you can learn from what the experiences that you have of being a brand ambassador, being in construction, being on radio, and distill from those things, not the top line brand title, but what the skills are underneath them, here's someone who appreciates fashion. How am I going to use that to, A, just be interesting and authentic and still represent myself, but also have fun and relate to the people I'm speaking to? How am I going to speak to that new audience member? You know, and same thing for us in print. How are we going to stand out, but also speak more authentically to you if you're looking for the best briefcase for work online? What am I doing in the magazine? And it's about distilling those things back to the original skill and what that actually means and your talent in that skill, and then finding a new way to expand that. So I don't think it's ever a situation where you can stop. I think your hunger just kind of expands and it goes a different way, and you grow through that. And what you are hungry for, you never stop being hungry, because as humans, obviously, we still need to keep eating, but our tastes change.
Sure. All right. As we draw to a close in this discussion, there are a lot of challenges out there, or young challengers, young innovators, people who are still yet to start their journeys and get to whatever point they'd like to. So where does a young challenger start? I mean, in this quest of being innovative, of never stopping, it's never enough, always be different, always stand out, always have a competitive edge, what would you say to a young person today as to where the starting point should be? I'm going to start with Nogwanda. Where does a young person start on their journey to becoming the next challenger?
For me, I think it started with passion, really. Passion, and then authenticity, and then the cost of what that means practically. Does it mean a move? Does it mean holding off on a couple of things so that you can realize other things first? So I would definitely say it starts with your passion. Identify what that is, and then from passion also grows authenticity.
Bryce, where does a young challenger start on this journey?
I think a young challenger starts off the back of many other challenges and the people that have come before you. You know, the idea of picking up where someone has left off, it speaks again to your point of, is it ever enough, or have I summited? And for me, the way I look at that is, look at it literally, like a mountain. Mount Everest is the biggest mountain in the world. When you summit it and you're at the top of the world, you still got to come back down. It's the same amount of distance that you went up, you've got to come back down. And in an innovative space, it's, I may have reached the pinnacle of creating something, but it's in the coming back down that I'm going to hand things over or inspire or pass things on. I'm going to meet someone who's on their way up the mountain, and I've just conquered this. And I'm going to look at them and I'm going to say, this is what lies ahead of you. And I think that's where a young individual's journey starts. It's parallel, and it starts with meeting those that are ending their journey, and you're starting yours. It's like a crossroad.
All right, well said. Moti, what do you say to a young challenger?
So I'll start off with, obviously the passion, the humility, discipline, practice, with whatever that they're doing. The more you do it, the more you actually put some work into it, and like the better you'll sound, with whatever that you're doing. And just like remaining present, like not locking yourself up in the house or waiting for people to come to your house and actually knock on your door and saying, yo man, we actually need you, So just being present, being out there, and that's it, and just keeping it cool over the years, and that's obviously part of humility.
Which is precisely what you've pointed out.
Yeah.
Is one of the key things, keeping it cool.
Yeah, man.
Yati, there's a young challenger out there. Where do they start in this journey in relation to innovation?
I think it starts with using what you have and using what life has already taught you, even if you're very young. The challenges that we were speaking about, we've all been through them, and we've all had to find creative ways to get around and over and under and around and above those challenges. And that's already a skill. And you can use that to propel yourself to the next level, but using those skills you already have, and using those to not immediately stand out, I think just stand up. I interviewed someone a few weeks ago who's a lawyer, and his firm represents not corporate clients or big petroleum companies. They represent creative entrepreneurs, fashion designers, musicians who need legal advice, but they need someone who also speaks their language, and he plays the guitar every weekend. And just knowing that he was a musician, he understands what they go through. He used that to help them. And I think that's such a great example of using whatever skills you already have, even if you're 17. Life has taught you something by then already. Unfortunately, that's the life we live in on this earth. Using that is so powerful because that will only inspire the next chapters of your story and everybody else's around you.
Absolutely. Owen, there are young challengers out there, you know, and what do you say to this person who still has to travel this journey? Where do they start?
Well, I would say the bedroom, dreams. You gotta have a vision for it, you know, and a whole lot of hard work. You know, you can have the skills, you know, and still not make it. But yeah, you just gotta work hard.
You gotta work hard. Swizer, to a young challenger out there who has to be innovative, that have to come up with new ways of doing things, where do they start?
I mean, mine is simple. Combating fear. You know, a lot of people are so limited by fear. You know, you put things on paper, but the doing becomes a problem because what if I fail? What if they don't accept me? What if... So I think that's one of the things that kind of bothered me. If I don't put out something that people don't like or whatever, you know, just combating fear and seeing what's on the other side of fear. Yeah, because I saw this from a post that Will Smith once did when he was doing his what's the name, paragliding or whatever. Yeah, understand. You will never know what it feels like, but everybody will tell you this is what it is. So how would you know? You know, you can't feel it if you haven't tried it. So break away fear and just do it. Nothing more.
Jill, what do you say to future challengers? Where do they start?
They start by not saying no. So say yes to everything, even if it's an interview that you don't even want the job for. Go to the interview because you can't say no to a job you don't have. So just go and do it and say yes to everything so that you have your options and you can choose where you want to go.
Cheers.
2 things. 1, define your value system. Number 2, find your true north. Because if you don't know your true north, it means that you don't know where you're going.
All right, and beautifully summed up. Ladies and gentlemen, with that said, it has now come to the point where we wrap up our evening and our podcast session for tonight. I highly appreciate your time, and I think this has been a very fruitful session. And I hope that whoever's listening to the podcast will certainly draw inspiration and at least something that will nudge them to, at the very least, start on their journey. We appreciate your time, and we appreciate your presence here in the Challengers Club. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful.